We're going to talk a little dollars and cents with NIL expert Pete Nakos of On3. And over the weekend, there was a lot of news on the 4th of July, none bigger than Felix Ojo, the elite offensive tackle, the 5-star offensive tackle, out of the state of Texas, choosing Texas Tech over Texas, Michigan, Oklahoma, and a bunch of others. So let's bring in Pete Nakos. Pete, the Felix Ojo deal, it created a ton of buzz, a lot of stir, but where did it rank among where the offensive tackles, Jackson Cantwell, maybe even David Sanders, where does his NIL deal rank amongst some of these big offensive tackles?
Yeah, so Felix Ojo commits to Texas Tech, picks them over Texas and Ohio State on the 4th of July, and his agent, Derek Shelby, puts out it's a $5.1 million fully guaranteed deal over 3 years, but did some double checking, talked to some Texas Tech sources. It's much more like a $2.3 million deal over 3 years, set to pay him about $775 annually. Where does that rank? So it's less than Jackson Cantwell is going to make in year one at Miami, because he's supposed to make in the 2.5 range, and it's less than what David Sanders is going to make this first year at Tennessee. So in the world of offensive line recruits, I mean, the $775 annually is not the most money we've heard. But the fact that it is 3 years for $775 definitely stacks up with some of the higher we've heard.
I'm a little surprised that Texas would lose this battle. I mean, we're not, we're talking Texas, Michigan. We're talking some big players in the NIL game. So why didn't Texas match, or why didn't Texas go over the top? Do you have any sense of why?
Yeah, this wasn't as much a financial thing as it was how long the deal was. I mean, 3 years is a substantial commitment to a player that isn't on campus yet, isn't in your weight room, and you don't really know how it's all going to pan out on the field. Obviously, our guy Charles Power is back there trying to great guys, and he does a fantastic job, but there's obviously still a risk when you spend $775 a year for 3 years on an offensive tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. There was another big decision that came on July 5th. Calvin Russell, in a ceremony of all ceremonies, he looked like a prize fighter walking into the ring with his entourage. Calvin Russell walks in and commits to Syracuse over Michigan and Miami. And on our show on Sunday, I said this was one of these deals that could only happen in the NIL era, but I don't know what I was talking about, because if you even look at who was in the battle for this one, you had Syracuse basically over, and there was a ton of other teams in it, but Michigan and Miami, two heavy hitters when it comes to NIL. So was this really an NIL? Was this decision predicated on NIL?
No, the end of the day, it didn't come down to money. And talked to some people around Calvin Russell. It's really clear that the relationship with Fran Brown just made all the difference at the end. And, going into it was Saturday, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was.
Like, Fran Brown didn't know he was going to Syracuse. A lot of people in his camp thought he was going to Michigan, but that relationship with Fran won out at the end of the day. Now, money-wise, if this was a strictly who has the biggest bag recruitment, I think he'd be going to Michigan right now. I'm not, super specific on the financials, but I know Michigan definitely had a higher offer on the table than Syracuse.
Yeah, so that's pretty incredible. Calvin Russell to Syracuse. And, I mean, of course, they have the money on the table. I mean, they're not offering them $0.
Of course, yeah.
But kind of interesting to see this go back to old school recruiting. It came down to the opportunities, the relationships, and he's heading to Syracuse.
But the flip side of that, too, is now that Syracuse has to hold on to him until National Signing Day, which is going to be a huge push for Fran Brown.
All right. Another big NIL battle, I think was a big NIL battle. Wide receiver Boobie Feaster off the board. He commits to USC over A&M, LSU, amongst others. I mean, this was a big-time recruitment for Boobie Feaster. Did USC really step it up here late, because they weren't always the favorite?
Yeah, USC stepped up big time. Reported this morning in a story that Boobie Feaster is expected to land a deal with USC that's going to pay him a multi-million-dollar deal over multiple years. And USC stood up when it needed to near the end of his recruitment with a really lucrative financial offer. And we've seen USC do that again and again with Mark Bowman and Luke Waffle. And USC wins out again on the trail.
All right, you wrote, let's reference that article you wrote about NIL collectives facing clearinghouse delays, recruiting offers soar, quote, deals ain't stopping. So you're referring to the new kind of Deloitte rules where there's a clearinghouse that has to clear deals. How's this going so far? And it's early, so we're not here to just jump all over the NCAA just to do so, but what's the early returns?
Yeah, so the story kind of goes down two paths, right? So you have recruiting. We just talked about it. There's more money being spent in recruiting than we've seen in a long time. And then on the flip side of that, you have revenue sharing has started in college sports. And with that, you have this new NIL clearinghouse run by Deloitte and college sports leaders. And every NIL collective deal that we've talked about in the last 4 or 5 years now has to go through this clearinghouse. Well, you know, a lot of people need to be paid from these third-party entities, and there's quite the holdup right now in these clearinghouses and deals trying to go through the clearinghouse, and reported on it in the story. And you know, there's a situation with an SEC school where the event the athlete was supposed to participate in has passed because the clearinghouse hasn't responded. And then there's another situation where a Big Ten school has almost $150,000 on the table for an athlete, and the clearinghouse has yet to, you know, give them any decision in the last almost 20 days now.
So there was a lot of people in college football. There were some ADs that came out and spoke about revenue sharing and how this was going to even the playing field when it came to NIL, and dollars would be equal, and they would rein in spending, and everything would just magically be under control again. So has that happened? Has spending been reined in by revenue sharing?
No, the spending is out of control as it has ever been. And, you know, maybe in a year, once this whole revenue sharing system kind of sets into place, we'll see some normalcy like people have anticipated and hoped for. But nothing has changed in the first 8-9 days of July.
Yeah. So ADs or schools that were thinking that this was going to happen, I mean, and that collectives were going to just magically disappear, but instead we're seeing, yes, revenue sharing is happening, but collectives are still. Are collectives still being funded now that revenue sharing is here, or are they just a thing of the past?
Collectives have taken on this new form of being the unofficial bagman of recruiting. When we talked about all these numbers being tossed around and recruits being paid before they even step foot on campus, that's coming from the collective. That's not, that's not coming from the school. That's coming through the collective. So it's just the next evolution of paying athletes in college sports, and it's not a finished product, and it definitely isn't a perfect product.
Yeah. And I mean, the thought was, well, the richest programs shouldn't get the richest or the best prospects. But I mean, that was happening well before NIL, and it's probably not going to stop anywhere soon, right?
Yeah. And the flip side of that too, Josh, is there's a quote in the story, like 2 years ago, not everyone was bought into like NIL and paying for a top quarterback or in the portal. But now, revenue sharing's here. Every Power 4 school in the country is spending some kind of money on a quarterback, a wide receiver, a recruit now. So that means that the tide has, it's come up in how much people have to spend, and we're seeing that in recruiting now too. So yeah, it's crazier than it's ever been. And there's supposed to be, the structure that is still being sorted through as we speak.
All right. Well, we'll see. Pete Nakos, NIL Insider, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
You bet. Thanks, Josh.